2020 Queen Anne's County Planning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good morning. Is there public comment that would like to be stated at the onset here? Seeing none, we'll close public comment, move on to meeting minutes and review.
Of approval of the minutes of the February 13th meeting.
There's a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, minutes are approved as written. Mr. Wisnowski, updates, legislation and legal matters.
Yes, I'm going to have my associate, Amy Mordock, come and speak to you.
Good morning.
Morning.
So we have closed the citizen-sponsored text amendment and map amendment period and received 4 applications for text amendments. One of them is specific to the resource conservation area to allow for accessory dwelling units. This was a state provision that was never adopted locally. Therefore, there's no provision in our current code that allows a resident to have an accessory dwelling unit in the resource conservation district. So this amendment really just comes in line with the minimum state standard. There's also an application in the Graysonville Village Commercial District, in the Graysonville Neighborhood Commercial District, that addresses a lot width standard, bringing it in line with the minimum standards in the code. There's a proposal to add definitions to the stormwater management section of the ordinance that would bring those definitions in line with state standards and guidance manuals. And there's also a proposal to update the definition of the resort hotel in terms of the rental policy. Those amendments have been forwarded to you officially by the county commissioners as of their meeting this Tuesday night, and you will see those applications in full detail at your April meeting. In addition, the commissioners have asked the staff to draft legislation relative to the collection of impact fees. And so the commissioners have sponsored that legislation, and you will also see that proposal at your April meeting. And a few other outstanding text amendments that will be coming soon. I don't know if they'll be ready for April, but in the near future, we will be finalizing the food truck legislation that we started some time ago. It's the season, and we really do need to get that before you to wrap it up. And also, you'll be seeing an amendment that is staff-sponsored that addresses our alcoholic production facilities in the agriculture, and our agriculture definition. We have a winery definition. We have a microbrewer, farm brewery definition. What we don't have is a provision that addresses distilleries. And I think that was an unintentional oversight, but it certainly is necessary for us to come in line because there is a need. And also, there's a lot of competition elsewhere in the state, and we want to make sure that our residents have that opportunity. So that is my legislative update. There's also a legal matter that I'm going to defer to Mr. Drummond, and that's just an update on House Bill 1390, Senate Bill 741, which Queen Anne's County has opposed, and Mr. Drummond has drafted a letter and can speak to that issue.
Well, that's in the nature of legislation. It's just not in the county. It's at the state level. Since we last met, I became aware that there is a cross-filing bill. It's SB 741 and House Bill 1390, sponsored by a senator from Montgomery County and a delegate from Montgomery County. It, among other things, would provide that the applicants for utility-scale solar that require a certificate of public convenience and need would not be obliged to seek local zoning approvals, or what is described as local discretionary zoning approvals, as part of a CPCN application, and that the Public Service Commission could not deny or penalize, if that's the right word, the applicant for not going through a local discretionary zoning approval process. The meaning of discretionary zoning approval is not clear, but it would clearly include conditional use applications, what other counties call special exception applications. Not clear whether it applies to site plan applications, but there's a peculiarity at the end of the bill that I'll get to in a minute that makes what I just described a complete head scratcher. The bill also would oblige the Public Service Commission to come up with statewide, quote, commercially reasonable setbacks and buffering requirements, end quote, for utility scale solar. Commercially reasonable is not defined. The bill calls upon the Public Service Commission to adopt regulations establishing these statewide standards by October 1st of 2020, which of course is when the bill would become effective if it's passed. Finally, relevance to the counties is that the bill says that counties may not, quote, unreasonably withhold, end quote, or delay site plan approval of a utility scale solar project, which of course is, I think, a discretionary zoning approval, which the beginning part of the bill says they don't have to go through. But the bill also doesn't say what happens if a county does, quote unquote, unreasonably withhold or delay site plan approval. The bill certainly was drafted by the solar industry. I mean, I can say that because I've spoken to an attorney who represents the solar industry, and I know from him that that's what happened. He didn't identify the drafter, but he claimed it wasn't him. The sponsors of the bill, Senator Feldman and Delegate Brooks, have indicated to MACO, Maryland Association of Counties, that they are not interested in changing the bill. It has had a hearing in the Senate and in the House. No votes are on it in either body yet. MACO, once it was alerted to the provisions of the bill, which it had overlooked, fortunately, has now officially opposed it. And MACO did send Les Knapp, who's the legislative guy at MACO, did testify against it in the House last week. I was scheduled to go. Unfortunately, I couldn't go because I had something else I couldn't move. Jay Falstad testified in opposition. I think there was one or two others. I'm not sure. Clearly, the solar industry has rallied behind it, and it's had people testifying. I sent a letter to the Public Utility Subcommittee of the House Economic Matters Committee explaining why the bill was either didn't make sense or was an overreach, and why the Public Service Commission certainly shouldn't be engaged in land use planning, why statewide setbacks and landscaping requirements certainly don't make any sense. I mean, you know, a solar array on the side of I-70 in Montgomery County is a lot different than a solar array on, you know, the side of Route 304 in Queen Anne's County. So we'll see. I have the impression from speaking to the Mako folks that because there's only one sponsor in each house, that they're hopeful that it might not get out of committee, but.
Just that hope.
Huh?
It's just that, a hope. Do you mind repeating those bill numbers for me, please?
SB 741 and HB 1390.
Thank you.
Can't hurt to send in some comments.
Do you know which committees they're assigned to?
House Economic Matters Committee. I can't remember what the Senate committee is. I'll get it and find out.
You can look it up, it's okay.
Transportation, maybe.
Unfortunately, on the Public Utilities Subcommittee of the House Environmental and Economic Matters Committee, there is a local delegate. By local, I mean it's Johnny Moutz, who's from Talbot County and Dorchester County. I think he's the only member on the Eastern Shore, I think, of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond.
Just checking to see if I had notes as
Murdoch?
to which committees it was in, and I don't. I can look it up.
You're all finished?
I am.
Excellent. Any questions for anyone? All right, excellent. Okay, moving right along then, starting with the projects, major site plan, SP 19-10-0042 Wells Cove Development. The applicant's requesting final site plan approval. Mr. Tarleton, the floor is yours.
Sure, yeah, I just wanted to note the change in the agenda to move the extension items to the end and bump up the development review requests for site plan approval and major subdivision approval due to the fact that Perry's Retreat is in here for a revised plan for a 156 lot subdivision. The previous iteration of their plan that was approved at a 128 lot subdivision is also up for an extension in the same meeting time frame, so we moved it to the end because if the applicant does receive final subdivision approval in this meeting, the extension would no longer be necessary for the 128 lot subdivision proposed. So that's why there's that change in your agenda items currently. Moving on to site plan 1910-0042, Wells Cove 2 LLC. The agent is Tom Davis with DMS and Associates. The property is located at map 57, parcel 341, lot 2, comprised of approximately 1.715 acres on the south side of Main Street, Route 18 in the southeast quadrant of the Kent Narrows, east of Wells Cove Road. The property is zoned WVC and identified as IDA in the critical area designations. As stated previously, the applicant's looking for final site plan approval, but also proposing to withdraw the third amendment of what is major site plan 0505050006 that proposed a 5-unit condominium building and reverting back to the second amendment of the plan or iteration of the plan that proposed the 4-unit condominium building and proposing additional modifications to that second amended site plan. So what you're seeing before you is an amendment to the second amended site plan, which is 05050006. And if you need clarification on that, I can certainly provide one. Moving on, here's just an overview, vicinity map of where the property is located. As stated previously, it is in the southeast quadrant of the Kent Narrows. The property identified here, highlighted in the black line, is parcel 341, lot 2, shown in the WVC zoning district. You can see the breakout orange lines in the property with the identification of lot 2 throughout. That is because this is also a condominium plat for the separate units. To the left there, you can see what was originally phase 1 of this project, which is the Hilton Garden Inn. Phase 2 encompasses the entire commercial unit condominium that you see in the top left corner of the development. And to the south, you can see the already constructed 4-unit condominium there. Here is the critical area designation map. As you can see, everything in red is designated IDA. Yellow is LDA, and the green there in the bottom corner is RCA. This property clearly falls within the IDA designation. Existing improvements, the majority of the site is pretty much built out aside from these 4 condominium units that were proposed as part of a revision for the Second Amendment of the site plan. The Second Amendment to the site plan also included some modifications to the proposed or existing pool rather, and some of the parking area as well that you can see is already constructed. The area that we're talking about here today is this small portion here where the proposed 4-unit condominiums will actually be. Here's just a brief overlay of exactly where those condominiums would be situated on the property from an aerial extent. You can see outlined in black there, they would take up the majority of what is that condo plat there, existing in a similar configuration of what's already existing for the other 4 condominiums. And here's just an improvement detail of what those condos would look like laid out on the property, with the driveway entering into the garage, the condos themselves in a staggered fashion up to the boardwalk, and you can see the proposed deck and stairway entering to that boardwalk area below. That boardwalk area in front of those slips there is actually a public access easement because those slips are rented or leased, I believe. Here's an overview of what is existing landscaping and proposed landscaping for the condo units. Obviously, the landscaping within the red circular area there is proposed as part of this construction as it will go in after the condo units are constructed. The highlighted gray areas around the site is the existing landscaping that was already provided for the previous iteration of the site plan. Those improvements are all there. We have an inspector that's going out to inspect that prior to final signature of this plan to ensure that all landscaping is installed adequately. Just a little overview of parking for Lot 2. Based on the uses designated on the site, Lot 2 requires 76 spaces. There are 68 provided on Lot 2. There's a note on the site plan on the first page that also shows a joint easement with the Hilton Garden Inn site that allows for additional parking on that site for individuals using any of the facilities on Lot 2 here as well. And then the existing paved parking you see out here in the drive aisles consists of 56 spaces, and the additional 12 spaces are provided in the garages for the condo units themselves. Just a breakdown of some residential site statistics and overall site statistics for Lot 2. As stated previously, the gross site area is 1.715 acres. The area reserved for commercial development, which is the commercial condo units, is 0.465 acres, meaning that the base residential site area is 1.25 acres. The WVC allows for 10 dwelling units per acre, which means they would possibly be able to construct 12 dwelling units. In this case, there's 8 existing and proposed. There's 4 existing and 4 proposed with this iteration of the site plan. And the minimum open space required for the WVC for that mixed-use development is 30%, meaning that it would be approximately 0.375 acres based on the 1.25 acre base site area. The applicant's proposing to provide 0.383 acres of open space. Just for overall calculations, their previously approved site plan allowed for 1.333 acres of lot coverage. The existing lot coverage is 1.205. Proposed as part of this development, it would result in 1.327 being under what was originally approved with the site plan. And the landscape area existing today is 0.510 acres, and landscaping proposed would be 0.388 acres. Building elevations, the permitted height here is 45 feet. The condos are proposed to be a height of 44 feet. You can see here on the left side you have the waterfront view of the condos, and on the right side you have the Route 18 view of the condos. And here are the side elevations, both similar, just for your viewing as well. Moving on to what is the existing condos, as you can tell, the plans provided for the elevation drawings are strikingly similar to these. The applicant has indicated that the materials, the colors, and all of those sorts of design guidelines will basically mimic what is existing there today with these 4 condo units. So what you're looking at here is the waterfront side of the existing condo units with the landscaping already installed. Here you have the front-facing MD Route 18. Pictures taken from the parking area facing those buildings with the landscape islands in the parking areas included in the photographs. Then here are the side views. The one on your left is facing from the existing dock or the pool area. That fence there is the actual pool area for the facility. And then the one there on your right is actually from the pad site for the proposed 4 condo units looking at the side of that existing building, excuse me. For consistency with the comp plan, based on our comp plan land use map here, we have the area designated within the Kent Narrows planning area. And then within the Kent Narrows community plan, you can see here the actual condo units actually shown up there in the right, or the left highlighted corner rather, for proposed buildings. This map was generated in '05. That's when this plan was originally going through the process. So that's how long it's been around that it actually shows up in the community plan maps. And then here you can see the property that we're talking about is actually highlighted in pink, designated as mixed-use development, just to show consistency there with what this project is proposing. That's all I have for you. If you have any questions for me, or you'd like me to go back to any slides, I'd be happy to.
Questions for staff? Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Tom Davis with DMS and Associates. Some of the Planning Commission members probably remember this from previous reviews there in 2015, 2016. I've been working on this project since 2004, so this is the final piece of the puzzle. And essentially, as Brennan indicated, we're kind of reverting back to the amended site plan phase 2 from, I think, 2007. That was about the time the economy took a tank. Then Mr. Thompson proposed the 5-unit building, which was approved by the Planning Commission, and that stalled, and that site plan actually expired. So we're basically just going back to amendment number 2, which is the 4 units. As Brennan had indicated, all utilities are in, the parking's in, so it's pretty much just an infill of the final pad of the development. Unfortunately, the builder, who's Jason Smucker of Smucker Homes, and my clients, Wells Cove 2, could not make it today. But it's pretty straightforward. The intent is to basically build what was previously approved and consistent with the existing 4-unit condominium building there. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant's agent?
Review the parking again. The number of spaces that were,
The project was actually developed as a joint development. Walt Thompson originally developed the Hilton Garden Inn, then he purchased what was a property called Scott Marine, which this property actually used to be a full-scale marina. And basically, there's shared parking agreements between the Hilton Garden Inn site and this site that provide the total parking for all uses of both the Hilton Garden Inn, the marina, and these condominium buildings. So there's 56 parking spaces in the paid parking area, and there's parking that be provided in the garages. And then again, there's a shared agreement with the parking there on the west side of the existing commercial mixed-use building and pool.
this includes the parking spaces over the Hilton Garden.
The overall plan originally was approved like that, and then we came back and reworked it so that this is a separate lot of record, but there's a shared parking agreement between the 2 parcels.
Mm-hmm. When you say garages, Mr. Davis, those are the unit garages that
Yes.
are on the first floor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything else? All right, I will entertain motion. Sorry,
Public comment?
public comment? Is there public comment? Excuse me. Seeing none.
Sheila will make a motion.
I move that we resolve that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Wells Cove 2 LLC to amend Amendment 2 of the major site plan number 0505050006 to construct a 4-unit condominium in Kent Narrows, and as more particularly described in the Department of Planning and Zoning file SP 1910-0042, hereby finds the proposal is consistent with plans for uses in the WVC zone and has received an exemption from critical areas requirements consistent with its being in the intensely developed area, and 3, increases vegetation on the property, and hereby grants final site approval, plan approval with the following conditions. 1, the building will be constructed in a substantially consistent manner with the architectural drawings and elevations provided, as well as being substantially consistent with the existing buildings as stated. 2, the applicant will adhere to the conditions of approval of the floodplain variance from the Board of Appeals. 3, all required bond, sureties, review, and inspection fees must be submitted to the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Zoning as appropriate. 4, a letter must be obtained from the APF administrator indicating that the proposed project is exempt from the requiring an APF study. 5, any remaining edits and/or documents required by the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Zoning be reviewed and approved. 6, any required legal documents must be approved, signed, and recorded. 7, all required signatures must be obtained.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations.
Thank you.
Next up, major subdivision, sub 05-14-05-0006, Perry's Retreat, Walter Properties LLC. The applicant is requesting final subdivision approval. Mr. Tarleton, back to you, sir.
Sure. Just to clarify on this one, Tom had pointed this out to me prior to the meeting, but there were a few notes left in here referencing several attachments. Those were just leftover comments from the preliminary staff report that I had failed to delete out of there, so there were no actual physical attachments to go with the staff report you received for this, so there's nothing missing from the staff report. There was just a simple mistake of not deleting some references within the staff report itself, just to clear up anything if you had any questions before I started. So here we're starting with subdivision 1405-0006. The property owner is Walter Properties LLC, developer Elm Street Development. And the agent here is Kevin Sheeran with DMS and Associates. The properties we're dealing with are identified as map 58H, parcel 208 or 201. A and B, map 64, parcels 45 and 46. The acreage of the property is roughly 110.89 acres. The property is located on the east side of Perry's Corner Road in Graysonville. The zoning district is GPRN, Graysonville Plan Residential Neighborhood, and as stated, the applicant is proposing to administratively combine parcels 45, 46, 201A, 201B into two parcels, 45 and 201. Donate parcel 45 to Queen Anne's County, and to subdivide parcel 201 into 156 lot single family subdivision using the cluster subdivision technique. The applicant's here before you today, also an error, I forgot to update this, requesting final site plan approval for the entire 156 lot subdivision. Here you can see just the general location of the property itself. The highlighted in black area is the overall entirety of what will be parcels 45 and 201 after the administrative subdivision is completed. You can see the existing property lines highlighted there in orange. Critical area designation, there are portions of this property that are designated as RCA. None of the applicant's proposed improvements for the development are to take place within the critical area designated areas. The site statistics still remain the same from the previous iteration of the preliminary plan that you saw. The parcel sizes are not going to change as part of the administrative subdivision. The applicant is still working through the process of obtaining that final administrative subdivision through the county now. So unless you have questions on that, I'll just kind of skip through some of these slides. I just wanted to leave them in there in case you did have questions. Here we have the forest conservation plan that's proposed. The conservation threshold is 17.33 acres, again, the same as the last iteration of the plan. The forest clearing permitted would be 54.79 acres. The forest to be cleared as part of this proposed development in that hatched area you can see, or cross-hatched area that you can see, is 39.51 acres. and the forest to be retained on site is 54.79 acres, and the applicant's proposing to protect the required 17.33 acres shown in the darker shaded area to the bottom right corner there. Here's an update from what the preliminary plan did propose from the applicant. They did update their phasing numbers as part of this project. You can see the phasing lines within the plan view here. Phase 1 was proposed at 46 lots previously and is still proposed at 46 lots. Phase 2 is now bumped up to 54 lots, and Phase 3 to accommodate the remaining 56 lots, therefore getting to your 156 lot total. All of the site statistic calculations remain the same. This is just an edit the applicant has provided based on what they've requested for phasing for this project. Here's the overall improvements for what would be consistent of Phase 1. You can see here it includes the first 46 lots as well as the road improvements to accommodate access to those lots, and the additional improvements for that park area that's proposed as part of this project as well. Moving on, here's Phase 2. The dotted area would be what is the improvements of Phase 1. The solid line area that you're seeing here is the 56 lots of Phase 2, or 54 lots of Phase 2. And then here would be the final build-out of what is Phase 3, encompassing the remainder of the 56 lots here, as well as the boat, RV, and storage area there to the southeast. Here's just an overview of the plan build-out, just to kind of give you an idea of where it would be situated on the property. And here are the existing wetlands maps that we have from the state. I think as stated previously in the preliminary plan, the applicant is proposing some wetland disturbance. They do have a permit already in hand for that disturbance that is valid until 2023. And here just an overview of the GPRN standards that you had found consistency with in the preliminary review of the plan. These have not changed from the preliminary review of the plan, so the 75% of the proposed development requiring to be single-family residential use. The applicant's proposing 100% single-family residential, so they're consistent with that. Maximum density would be 3.1 or 3.5 dwelling units per acre. Based on the plans here, we have an average of 1.6 dwelling units per acre, and 25% of the total site area has to be comprised of open space, with 10% being recreational use open space. Those site statistics were provided on the previous slide to show that the applicant complies with those as well. And then the design standards proposed, or the bulk standards proposed for the applicant's lot layouts here, we have a minimum lot area of 6,000 square feet, minimum lot frontage of 45 feet, impervious area per lot is proposed at 38%, front setbacks being 15 feet, side setbacks being 5 feet, rear setbacks being 20 feet. Again, the applicant has not specified a building height for these buildings. If the Planning Commission so chooses, you could add a restricted building height to this as well, since the Planning Commission is the decision-making body on the design standards in the GPRN zoning designation. Here's just a general overview of a lot layout. This is a portion of what is going to be Phase 1. It just kind of gives you an idea of where the building restriction lines would exist within these lots. Highlighted in red is the actual building restriction lines proposed, so the building footprint area would be encompassed within those highlighted red areas. The proposed entrance feature has not changed from the previous one. The applicant's proposing a boulevard-style entrance with an ingress area to the right there, and then an egress area from the left, with a traffic circle going into the development itself. Here in this plan, you can also get a glimpse of some of the proposed landscaping, the street tree landscaping, as well as the traffic circle facade, and some of the additional proposed stormwater features. The architectural renderings remain the same from what you saw in the preliminary plans. This is just an overall street view of what the proposed development would look like. And these are some of the architectural renderings of the proposed homes that would go within the development itself. The proposed park detail has not changed from the preliminary plans. This is the same proposed park detail with a crosswalk being located in front of the park, a walkway inside, additional improvements to include benches and a children's play area, as well as street lights outside of the park. The proposed lighting plan is something the applicant had updated from the previous plan. I think the previous iteration that you saw consisted of roughly 60 streetlights within the entirety of the development. The applicant has revised that based on what they believe their needs would be for this development. So we're going from 60 streetlights to 28 streetlights. Highlighted here in yellow are just the proposed streetlights as part of the top portion of the project, or phase 1, and a portion thereof, phase 2. And then we move down to the second portion of the project, and these are, again, highlighted in yellow, the proposed street lighting improvements for the second portion thereof for the development. And then just again, this area is located as designated by the comprehensive plan maps, the Graysonville planning area. And you can see located in this area that the property is in the county and town planning areas. And the designation for it within the comp plan, again, is medium density residential, which is comprised of 2 to 8 dwelling units per acre typically. And that's all I have for you. If you'd like, yes?
What is the height restriction in this district?
The GPRN does not have a height restriction per se. It just states within the code requirements that the planning commission should develop or approve of the bulk standards within the district. So the standards as far as setbacks, lot minimum, lot width, those are things that the planning commission has the authority to make decision on. So whatever you see fit as far as a height restriction for a building would be what the height restriction would be for a building. So that's. I don't know, Kevin, if you wanted to touch on the proposed buildings. It looks like nothing, obviously nothing's over 2 stories, so I don't know if you have an idea what you would feel comfortable with as far as building height restrictions.
Sure, thank you. Kevin Sharon, DMS and Associates. All of the proposed houses that have been presented to the Planning Commission are 2 stories. And so I would feel comfortable putting a number of 30 feet on as the maximum height for the proposed houses.
What kind of price range these houses are going to be in?
Very good question. Only because this has been driven, if you look at the history of the project, Mr. Priest, you can see that it's gone through many iterations since 2005. And the reason for that is after the crash of 2007, the dynamics and methodology of subdivision and land improvement has totally changed, as bank financing criteria has also totally changed. Consequently, I represent Walter Properties, the owner of the property, as well as Elm Street Development, who is a developer, but neither one of those people will be the actual person constructing the home. So Elm Street has gone out to enter into a contract with home builders to actually, in pre-2007, the home building company would go out and do the development. They would get the financing. It took many of those corporations down when you had the downturn in the development. Financial institutions are no longer doing that. And the builders are no longer primarily, KHOB being one exception, but most of them are not doing the actual acquisition, development, and building. So Elm Street went out, secured a builder to go and to purchase the lots. They end up coming up with what they want as far as the plans for the structures to go in that residential community. That was done after the fallout post-2007. The original developer or builder backed out. Elm Street had to go back and find someone new. So it's been a moving criteria. These were developed at the time we got the concept plan approved going for the additional lots. And they were approved back in 2016, 2017, because the builder thought that this was something that could be marketed in Queen Anne's County. The theory was that it would probably be something that it would be an affordable product that would start in the high fours with extras would bleed over to probably into $500,000 plus. That is still where they stand today. And hopefully the market is still, quite honestly, shaky. You know, we have not recovered here on the Eastern Shore from the total effects of the crash in 2007. But as we slowly began to recover, then all of a sudden we've got the phenomena with the Bay Bridge traffic that is just, no one knows where the market is. But certainly our plans currently, the division has been designed for this product. This product is going to be in the high fours, bleeding over maybe to over $500,000, and that is the plan today.
A little pricey for what we're looking at, I think.
Well, you know, it's pricey, but the problem that you have is that the water and sewer for this project is well over $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that for sewer allocation. You know, when you start adding in all of those numbers, it's pricey by historical Eastern Shore standards. It's still well under Anne Arundel County and counties on the Western Shore, and I would say products like this probably are $100,000 more anyway on the Western Shore. Quite honestly, you've got to be $100,000 under what the Western Shore price is in order to make them come across the bridge. And it's a simple fact that we're still dealing with, and who knows what the marketability is because of the current instability caused by traffic conditions, much less coronavirus health issues and everything else that's going on in the world today. But that principally is why this is a phased development, is because bank financing, both from the acquisition and construction standpoint, as well as from the build-out standpoint, from the builder side, banks aren't financing big projects. They'll do it in component pieces, but that is it. And let me just add one thing, a comment on what Brennan said about the lighting plan. The lighting plan was modified by the most recent builder, who thought they didn't need that number of streetlights. Candidly, I think maybe we've gone from too many streetlights to too few streetlights. So I would make a caveat that we would agree for the Planning Commission to say that we would have the number of streetlights in there that the Department of Planning and Zoning determines in their best judgment is applicable.
Thank you. Mr. Foster, most of us know you. Would you mind, for the record,
Yes, Michael.
introducing yourself?
Excuse me, Michael Foster, attorney for Walter Properties as well as Elm Street Development.
Thank you, sir. Didn't want to interrupt. Mr. Tarleton, has the department had any discussions to Mr. Foster's point about increasing that number? Have you identified potential locations, or have you not gone down that far in the pathway yet, the discussions?
I have, very briefly, I spoke with Kevin based on the proposed revised plans for the street lighting and expressed some of my concerns based on some of what was provided. If I can go back to these slides, bear with me one second. If you can see on this sheet, there's several areas where the actual crosswalk overlays are shown. And if you look at the lighting in those areas, there's some of those areas that actually don't receive any immediate lighting. My main concern with that was that we should be providing adequate lighting at all crosswalks, since this will be a walkable community. There will be sidewalks involved in this. There's a recreational area, so therefore kids will be using the streets and sidewalks. You know, I proposed that to Kevin, and Kevin said that, you know, they thought that was a good idea. Unfortunately, the top portion here doesn't have that sidewalk overlay, so I couldn't really judge well enough to know whether or not there were adequate street lighting in this area. So I think maybe we can work through further and get some good ideas of where more lighting is necessary. And my proposal was to add that additional lighting into those areas where there'll be foot traffic mostly.
And we're willing to do that. The original plan was laid out basically just on a foot increment of how many streetlights, per the length of the road. And the home builder came back and said that a lot of times in communities, they wind up getting complaints from homeowners that the street lights are too bright, everything's shining into their lights. So it's a fine line, it's a balance between too many and too few. This was the proposal that the home builder came up with, and like I said, we're certainly willing to work with the county to either move them, add more, or whatever needs to be done to come up with a compromise.
The fallback is what the county requires, really.
Correct.
How many more lights would the county require?
Again, the lighting is actually part of the GPRN standards, which is a decision allowed to be made by the Planning Commission themselves. So if you have an amount that you see fit for here, personally, I haven't done enough analysis on the actual plans themselves to give you a numerical value of what I feel comfortable with. I think ultimately redesigning what's already existing there for the 28 lights to put lighting in adequate areas and then working backwards from there would probably be the best way to figure out that number. But unfortunately, without doing that and having a little bit more engineering, I don't know that I could give you a number right now that we would feel comfortable with saying is the end-all be-all for the project. I think it would be good to be able to look at a new iteration of this lighting plan that proposes lighting in the areas that we feel would be safest.
Mr. Priest, if I may suggest, instead of us today trying to put little additional yellow dots around that, I would say again that, planning and zoning, we had an original lighting plan. We're happy to share that with planning and zoning. Whatever they determine that they think is necessary and adequate, we're happy to comply with.
I should point out that we do get, by we, I mean the department has gotten complaints from folks about streetlights, that being too many in some of the Kent Island communities that were approved some years ago.
The general rule is you're going to get complaints if you don't have them, and you're going to get complaints if you do have them.
That's the fine line.
That's right.
Yeah, the original plan was 60 lights, wound up being about one for every 2.5 houses. So it was clearly overlit. This may be a little bit underlit, and I think we'll be able to find a compromise.
That's something we can leave up to the discretion of the director of the department.
Yeah, I think so.
Any other questions?
Another unintended consequence of all these great plans, for example, is that we get complaints about street trees after a while busting up the sidewalks. And most of the time, sidewalks are not in the county maintenance obligations, which I assume would be the same thing here. So if all the street trees start busting up the sidewalks, it's going to be the HOA's problem. Moreover, we've had HOAs complaining about the cost of the electricity for the streetlights. So.
Plant a tree underneath a light.
Right.
All right, any other questions for staff, the applicant, or the?
In the lighting,
Go ahead, Tom.
is there a amount of light? I mean, we're talking about too much light, but simply put a dimmer light.
Well, you can
But
do
with
that.
the
You can
technology we
also,
have today, it's,
in the lighting itself, you can actually put little deflectors so that if there's a house and a window there, you can channel that.
Yeah, there are options.
I'm not saying, I just don't think it's necessarily the number of lights, but the amount of light that you're getting.
I think it's all the
And
above,
somehow we
correct.
work that, yeah.
All right, any other questions for the gentleman at the table or staff? Any other public comment about the proposal that was just proposed, for lack of a fancier word?
So the planning commission is clear. The applicant proposes to do something that's a little bit unusual for our county, and that is while it seeks final subdivision approval for all 156 lots, that is all 3 phases, it wishes to record only the phases as it's ready to proceed with the phases. For example, while all 156 would be approved, it's the applicant's intention to record a plat for only the first 46 lots, which is phase 1. And then when it's ready to move on to phase 2, with the final approval, if it's given today, submit a phase plat, a phase 2 plat to planning and zoning for signature. And the reasons for that should not escape the planning commission. It has to do with sewer allocation costs, bonding and sureties, stretch out the expenses of it so they're not all up front. I've indicated I don't have a problem with that approach. We can be sure that as the phases are added, that the conditions that must be met will be applied to each phase. Public Works Agreement would be extended essentially geographically as phases come on, that sort of thing.
And if I may add an additional comment on that, I think that historically, a lot of jurisdictions do allow phase subdivision. The problem with phase subdivision, from a county perspective, is if you go in there and simply do the first phase and then abandonment, do you have an absolute mess after that? So, on the other hand, you don't want to be able to market in phase 2 until you have a recorded plat for phase 2. What we have proposed here is that we want to show you a comprehensive plan because the county has had experience, and Mr. Drummond's been up here, where we have dealt with subdivisions that have added another 5 lots, another 5 lots, another 5 lots, and they have been horrible subdivisions. So you really want to do a comprehensive plan on what the subdivision is going to look like, and that's what we've done here. We will front load so that when we record phase 1, the entire forest protection area, we will do all of those documents and we will have them recorded for the whole subdivision. So the county will be protected up front, little things like accel, decel lanes. That will be done up front with phase 1. So basically, we're protecting the county by saying that we will go on and record all those necessary documents, and we get the corresponding protection of knowing that if phase 1 is successful, we don't have to come back in here for phase 2 approval and phase 3 approval. In the past, historically, developers could not do that. Like when I represented Ellendale, we had a dilemma that you had to go and either buy the allocation or you had no guarantee that you would get the sewer allocation. So you could do a phased subdivision, but the problem was you didn't know whether there was going to be sewer allocation for phase 2. Back then, when we had the gorilla in the room being K-Hob coming in on Four Seasons, we didn't know whether there was going to be any between that and southern Kent Island. So it forced the developer to actually go on and record everything, and that's back in an era when banks would finance that, to do the whole subdivision at one time. In this particular project, the county came back about a year and a half ago, and when I say the county commissioner sitting as a sanitary district, and they said, look, we've got these commitments to give you allocation for projects that have been sitting dormant. We're now beginning to run out of sewer allocation with the Route 8 expansion. We need to find out who's for real there and who's not for real. The end result was that we went in September of last year. We executed a public works agreement with the county, different than the public works agreement that we're currently going through for this project. But it reiterated that we were doing 156 lots. We were going to do it in 3 phases, and they said we will hold this allocation for all 3 phases for what could end up being 36 months. But we had to put a non-refundable deposit down of $211,000. So we have put that the county has that $211,000. It's not coming back to us. If we walk away, it's the county's money. In return for that, they have deviated from their history in the past, from their past position by allowing us to just pay for Phase 1 as we record Phase 1 plat. And then when we come back with Phase 2 plat, we'll pay another $600,000-$700,000, whatever it is, for water and sewer on Phase 2, and then finally for Phase 3. So the county said, we're going to give you, within certain time parameters, the ability to do that. We're taking advantage of that by coming back, and I've gone over that with Mr. Drummond, making this pitch likewise for under the adequate public facility and affordable housing. The 37 acres that is back there, and we have gotten an appraisal on, which was multi-millions of dollars, far more than the payment in lieu of. And we have agreed to go on and to deed that to the county. Typically, you have to deed.
Well, to be fair, only if Phase 2 comes on.
I'm getting to
There's a
that.
magic number there in Phase 1.
Yeah, but Phase 1, we're underneath where we would be required to have any affordable housing units. Normally, then, as you go to Phase 2 and 3, you would end up having to build affordable housing units as you build out. We're not going to do that when we record Phase 2 plat. We're going to give the 37 acres to the county, so in effect, we're going to, from a developer's obligation, we're going to front load and deed that to the county at that point in time, even if we don't go to Phase 3.
That's fair, I mean, because they would only have to build 10%.
That's accurate, Mr. Drummond.
10% at the end of by the end of the project. And here, once they hit the magic number, which is 47, you'll notice Phase 1 is 46. When they got to number 47, it might trigger them to have to build one MPDU, and then on throughout the rest of the project. So here the county gets the 37 acres at number 47.
And just to be clear, so the 156 lots, that number of allocation will be encumbered for sewer access if final approval is granted.
We already have that.
You already have that in hand.
We paid that $211,000, so we have the
So
commitment
that's
for
to
sewer.
hold that.
Correct.
Those allocations for this build out. And you've paid a deposit, but you're not fully paying for those until they're built, I'm presuming.
When we record Phase 1 plat, we'll have to pay another $400 and some thousand for the remaining allocation for Phase 1 for water and sewer. And then when we come along and record Phase 2 plat, we'll have to pay those $600,000 for that allocation at that point.
Just not to be scary or whatnot, but what happens should this not proceed to full build out with those encumbered? Do they eventually come back to the county and
Into Phase 2.
The allocation.
if they don't get built out in
I think
full?
there's a sunset provision, it's.
Maximum 36 months.
Okay, so I hope it does, but if it does not, those numbers come back on the county side of the ledger.
Right.
To sell again.
If there's a recession, we got big problems. Seriously.
Mr. Wisniewski?
Do I understand from that your anticipated build-out is 3 years? Because your sewer allocation.
3 years
yes.
would not be the anticipated build-out, but it would be the anticipated time when we would record the plat for Phase 3.
And so the mitigation of risk to the county on giving you the advanced sewer allocations of $211,000 or whatever your deposit is gone once you've recorded the plat for Phase 1, because you're applying that to your Phase 1 costs for water or sewer. So the county no longer has any collateral, if you will, for Phase 2 and 3 on the advance of the water and
There's a
sewer.
36-month deadline.
Well, there's the 36-month deadline, but there's no money in
Ms.
that
Tolliver,
at
actually,
risk.
there is other collateral that the county is getting. For instance, we have to put in a water pipe for, a major water pipe, 12 inches? For extension from Route 8 to the property. That 12-inch pipe is to serve 156 plus the other houses in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be done up front in Phase 1. So there are other front-end loading to the developer that gives the county some extra collateral, if you want to call it, But if we do get to the end of phase one and we can't go forward, the county simply, the allocation moves back, it's owned by them, we lose any rights to water and sewer allocation, and we would have to go back and reapply for it if we wanted to do that.
Aren't there some pump station upgrades too in phase one?
Starts with phase two.
Phase two.
The vacuum station gets
And-
upgraded by the park.
And
Yes.
fairly substantial improvements. And again, that would be done at the beginning of phase two plat being recorded, which would be anticipating phase two and phase three. Even if we don't go to phase three, that has to be bonded and done at the time we record the phase two plat.
I have another question, shifting gears a little bit. It seems like I recall at one of the earlier meetings, a couple, 3 or 4 years ago, that there was some decorative on the entrance to the project, and I could not find any drawings that were given showing any build-up of aesthetically, I'm talking about, brick columns or whatever to identify the,
So there's
is that
a,
anything being proposed?
there
at
is
all?
there's a subdivision entrance sign that'll be either stone or brick with a landscape bed in front of it, and then there will be kind of a boulevard section at the beginning of the subdivision, and then at the roundabout, there will be a landscaped area in the middle of that. And then beyond that will be the park internal to the subdivision that will have amenities in it as well.
Coming off of Prairie Corner Road, there will be some,
There will be a landscaped entrance there with a
landscaped
sign
entrance,
identifying
yeah.
the subdivision.
okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I would just like to speak briefly about the phasing plan. Could you go back to the phasing plan, Brennan? We're in support of the phasing plan. It's a rather common technique in other parts and jurisdictions in Maryland and in other states. So we're comfortable with that. The risk of a phasing plan, of course, is if phase one is built and phase two and three never happen because the market crashes or something. So what we always look at when we're evaluating a phasing plan is to make sure if it never goes beyond phase one, that the phase one plan functions properly. So normally what you would see are cul-de-sacs at the end of the phases. So
Did Brennan just put up the phase one picture?
So as an example, you could see where the phase one line ends. Practically, there should be a plan that shows a cul-de-sac at the end of those as part of the phasing plan. And that cul-de-sac should be part of the bonding for phase one. And there should be some type of time constraint placed on phase one, because what we don't want to see happen is in 20 years, it still looks like that, where you have dead-ended roads without an opportunity to turn around, and therefore it's not functioning on its own. So I think there needs to be some provisions to the phasing plan that take that into consideration if the project never moves beyond phase one.
And actually, I asked the Department of Public Works if they wanted those cul-de-sacs shown in there, and we've shown them before where it shows a cul-de-sac and then it shows to be abandoned when phase two plat is approved. It's an easy way, and I think what Mike suggested is the proper way to go. I was told we don't have to do that. So
I would ask that you do that. And I'll have a conversation with Public
okay,
Works.
and very easy for us to do with a plat notation.
I would think the fire marshal would probably agree with that approach as well. Or school buses for, all public amenities.
It's really just a paper document. I mean, we all have hope and faith that the project will continue through the other phases. This is kind of a safety provision if nothing happens beyond phase one, and that's what we're concerned
I
about.
think good suggestion. And
Yeah, we don't have a problem with that.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for applicants, staff? More, yes, Ms. Gazzari.
Good morning. Nancy Scazzari with Department of Parks and Recreation. So, been working on this with the applicants for quite a while, and a big key component for Parks Department was connectivity. I see that they've left the connectivity to Graysonville Park, which was a big part of it. They've included the park internal to their own subdivision, which was an ask, and that's great. But I can't make out on there, it looks like wetland buffers, but at one point we had a trail that connected to Gravel Run Road. It's mentioned in the comments, but I don't see it on that plat.
Correct. That trail was not, the trail originally to Gravel Run Road was to go over top of a water line that was to loop to Gravel Run Road.
Maybe everybody should be
Brennan,
clear
can you show
where
us where
Gravel
that would
Run
be?
Road is,
Yeah.
top right.
It's in the
Very
top right corner of the property.
Where the dump
Phase,
is.
where the lot
Right,
phases.
transfer
North
station,
of the lands to
excuse
be dedicated to the county. And it was supposed to come in between those two lots. I see the space between the, I can't make up the lot numbers, but, yeah, 218, I guess.
There you go. It's to the top right of that property. So originally, the request by the county sanitary district was to bring the water line from Route 18 down Perry's Corner Road into our subdivision, and then through the property to Gravel Run Road on the northeast side. It was determined that looping was not necessary, and that was the path whereby we were getting permits for the utility, clearing the woods, that kind of thing, to put the trail through there, or put the trail on top of the water line. And when the water line went away, the trail also went away in that location. Not to say that it can't be added later, but phase 2, that would be the county's property, and a trail could be connected back to Perry's Retreat subdivision.
So will we have the opportunity to review that again as Phase 2 comes online? This is it,
At phase 2, the county would then own the property where that path would go.
what you were just
Right,
saying.
right.
So,
There still is a path, Mr. Sheeran and Ms. Scazzari, between, let's say we don't get to, full build out, but there is a connectivity planned internally from your property to the north to get to the park.
Jacksonville Park.
No,
Is that correct?
that was also discussed and abandoned because of, the developer did not feel that it was good. It would be nice for the residents to be able to access the park, but they didn't
Not so much the
necessarily
other
want
way.
the other way around. We are providing a crosswalk and not signalized, but signed crosswalk to get from the property over to the Seebeck property.
Okay.
That would provide some connectivity for walking out to the Seebeck property.
So if a resident in this potential community want to go to the park, they would go out your boulevard, turn right on north on Perry's Corner,
You're right
and
there
then
at
access
the right.
through the main entrance of the park,
Exactly.
if that's, or cross the
There's no
crosswalk
sidewalk there.
and go into Seebeck.
Exactly,
Correct.
right.
So, so what you just stated, Kevin, contradicts the notes here and what we've worked out for so many years. So I'm just curious why we can't still get that connection to the park through your Phase 1.
I'm not sure which notes you're referring
Notes
to.
you should talk.
The notes in the staff report.
Which page are you on, Nancy? 4.
4.
4 that I put in there is actually the historic notes from what's previously approved. That's not actually part of this plan here. I think if you look onto page 3, it's located in the history section.
It was
The
previously
review
approved and
highlights that
removed.
start at the bottom of page 4 and 5 is what they're proposing now, which doesn't include the connection that you're speaking of. So that was done away with in the preliminary plan, I believe, or some iteration of the plan thereof before my review.
Okay. We knew it to be previously approved, so now my concern is you come out of the front entrance, you turn north on Perry Corner Road, there's no safe access by that water treatment plant, the pump station there, into the park, and now we've lost the connectivity through the subdivision, which I guess it's still a utility line that you show there between those lots, if you can go back to that plat that shows, it must be, because I had them leave that section, see where it goes from their internal part?
That's just a storm drain pipe that goes back to a stormwater management facility.
Right, but originally, when we asked for internal park and all, it was with a connection to the Graysonville Park. So now, how would one safely walk a pedestrian or bicyclist from the subdivision into Graysonville Park or beyond? There's no sidewalk along Perry's Corner.
There's sidewalk, but in there at the end.
Right.
There is an axle decel lane, yeah. I don't know. I mean, like I said, that was originally planned, it was discussed, and it was removed from the plan. So,
Yeah, it was approved with the last approval, the preliminary approval, and then removed apparently, so. Well, maybe we can work together to put something, I mean, you've got that open space between the lots coming from your park, north-south, and that's where it was intended to make that connection, so just, hoping we can get that back. So that's my comment. The connectivity, we've lost that connectivity. So, thank you.
Sure. Brendan, would you overlay or go back to the slide you have with the non-tidal wetlands, the green
Yeah,
sort of blobs? Wrong way. Yeah. There you go. So
it's not.
Mr. Sheeran, looking at this, seems to be non-tidal wetlands or potential intermittent stream impacts if there were to be a connectivity in the future to the north to the park.
correct. When we had looked at that originally, and keep in mind, this map is just a generalization of wetlands. The wetlands have actually been field delineated, but to your point, Mr. Lee, there is an intermittent stream on the east side of the property that then traverses the north side between the subdivision and Graysonville Park. When we were looking at that, the impacts were going to be crossing a stream, not only the stream but the buffer, and it was looking like it was going to have to be a boardwalk in order to do it, in order to minimize the impact of the stream and the buffer, including some of the surrounding wetlands. And so not only did the trail go away there, but also the utility connections because of the impacts. We were originally planning on bringing the water line and the sewer line to the pump station through that direction also. That was abandoned primarily for environmental reasons, and a much more costly route going up Perry's Retreat Road is what that is now.
And it looks like there's the same concerns, environmentally at least, going to the east to Gravel Run, following those, roughly delineated wetlands.
Correct.
Right.
Again, you would have to cross that intermittent stream that's mapped.
Thank you.
One other item, another question I have is the emergency entrance. Your access to this property, going all the way into Phase 3, is the single access off of Perry Corner Road. There was a line item here, it said, the other noted access off of Prairie Corner will be future emergency access depicted to the south. Is that, from a safety viewpoint, fire equipment and so forth, is that adequate, or is that?
Yes, sir. As the subdivision grows, it's a good idea to identify other areas for another access. The 156 lots is adequate to come in and out of one point of ingress and egress. Future phases, in fact, the configuration of the dedication parcel to the county commissioners anticipates a completely separate project from this one, but that would connect public roads from internally of the Perry's Retreat subdivision up to Gravel Run Road, which would provide another access to that location. We are showing a second access down onto Perry's Corner Road, but we don't control that property, and so that connection cannot be made at this time.
There was a tax sale many years ago that little oddball sliver of ground that goes from Talisman Farm area, this little sliver, I don't know where it came from, but it was a subject of a tax sale, and that is owned independently by a third party. So we could not cross there. And also, if you look right behind that, to cross there, that's where the original 168 lots or whatever was originally planned back in 2005. It actually showed another emergency exit down there, Mr. Priest, but you've got to go through the wetlands to get there also. So you've got separate ownership plus the wetlands that make it impossible to get that second access to Perry's Corner Road.
Well, the initial reaction here is that it looks like we're landlocked with one entrance. And if you had an emergency on the front end of that thing near Perry Corner Road, the other residents would be hard pressed to get out of there. Would they not? Jody, you may want to.
It's actually Graysonville's jurisdiction.
This has been kicked around for about 15 years on this project. This business about a second entrance, and many years ago, the applicant was asked to go back to the property owner of the sliver, see if something could be worked out. It didn't happen. People came in, we had folk come in to say that the one entrance was satisfactory.
Mr. Priest, I will point out one thing. Where the main entrance is currently located is probably the highest, topographically, the highest point on the entire land. It gets much lower as you get back in that, towards the Talisman Farm. So, I mean, where the entrance is located is the best place for an entrance, and we are doing accel, decel work along there. And then ultimately, I think theoretically, when the county owns the 37 acres, they will be developing that in some fashion for affordable housing or something like that, hopefully you're going to have practically an entrance that's going to come back up to the back of the lots on phase one anyway.
Thank you for your answer. It's not what I wanted to hear, but
Sorry.
I just have a problem with that, quite frankly. I have not been reassured that in case of emergency, we've danced around this whole thing, Mr. Foster, and you're a good dancer, and as an attorney, I respect you. But I was hoping for a little better analysis of how we're going to get fire trucks in and out, or an ambulance, or other emergency equipment. Does anybody else have any problem with that, or am I just picking on the wrong?
Can I suggest something that maybe in your approval, if you would like to have a caveat that says your concerns, I think, would primarily rest with phase three. Phase 1 and 2 are to the north, the northwest, close to the main entrance. Phase 3 is which takes the development in a southeasterly direction. If you want to put in there a caveat that prior to recordation of any plat for phase 3, that we revisit the issue of an emergency exit and see what the possibilities are and discuss that with planning and zoning, we're happy to do that. Phase 1 and phase 2, I don't think you need it.
No, I understand. I'm talking about the build out of the three phases, and then Jody, I guess you're not going to comment on it. I could.
Jody Schultz, Ken Allen, and I'm in here no way to be a representative of anything other than my experience at the firehouse. This is Graysonville's territory.
I assume they had the opportunity to comment on that through the fire marshal, which he's really good about getting with us. I would just point out that we're loaded with subdivisions with one entrance. I mean, Gibson's Grant, Four Seasons, Mallard Run, Kerwin's Lane, everything's got one entrance. And, you know, I would think the only time that would be fully blocked off is if there was some major fire right at the entrance where we're blocking the road. But I really can't think of that happening in my experience with the fire department. And we're conscientious of not, you know, kind of taking up the whole road unless it's absolutely necessary, so.
Well,
It'd be nice to have another entrance, in general, on all these, but
Could be fire hydrants throughout the community?
There'll be fire hydrants and all the houses will be sprinklered also.
which is a big plus because you don't need, typically with a development that's, has a public water supply, you don't need, you know, tankers and a lot of these big trucks that typically take up the road and the need to shuttle in and out that kind of water supply. But again, I'm not speaking for this is Graceville's territory, but, you know, we're usually conscientious about blocking stuff up, kind of knowing what the deal is, you know.
Thank you. I'll rest my case.
Do I recall correctly or not that the future emergency exit road was going to be, built isn't the right word, but, you know, you can put, what's the word I want, when you put the gravel or the
Like
support.
grass block, kind of permeable.
Yeah, so that if emergency equipment has to go over it, even if it's grass, or that they won't sink in the mud. I'm not being very technical about it.
I get what you're saying. I don't think we'd really even gotten that far as to what
I
they
thought
would-
there was talk about that, and then it would have to stop at the Van Buren property. But frankly, if there's a road there and there's a disaster, do you think some fire truck's not gonna go across that 15 feet and access that road if it's there?
No. I can comment on that, but that never happens.
Someone sees Fire Road and, you know,
Well, it's good
it's 10
discussion.
feet off the road.
So to my knowledge, there is such an access at the development going out of Centerville, I think, the big one, Symphony Village. That was provided, and so who's ever driving that piece of fire equipment would have to know it's there.
Well, you could mark it.
And if it's a rainy day, or if it's snow and it hasn't been plowed for access, you know, I doubt, as a driver, I'm gonna take my 80,000-pound fire truck and drive it through an area that maybe just because it says fire access, you know, I'm not sure it's really gonna be sustainable for a great big piece of equipment. So just having that, I mean, I can tell you that I don't know that that's ever happened.
Right.
You know, so I would be really cautious about saying, drive your fire truck over this piece of grass.
I
Just
know
'cause
that,
there's a sign there
Mike,
that's-
you might remember this, there seems to me that happened in Chester River Beach.
In Winchester.
Winchester it was.
There was an old platted street partially built in an earlier phase of Chester Haven Beach, and we left open an area between two lots
Chester
and
River.
did put a sub-base in,
Yeah.
but it's never been used, and it's now has kids' playground equipment and other stuff involved.
Okay. All right, well, maybe it's not a.
Reverting back to nature.
Yeah.
We want a nice road to drive on, because, you know, bad weather, it's a crap show sometimes, just, you know.
There's a technical term. Any other public comment? Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Anything from the board? All right. I will open the floor to comment or to a motion.
I move that we resolve that the Planning Commission regarding the request by Walter Properties LLC and Elm Street Development to combine 4 existing parcels into 2 parcels, donate parcel 45 to the county, and subdivide parcel 201 into 156 single-family lots using the cluster subdivision technique as part of a planned residential community in Grayson,ville, and is more particularly described in Department of Planning and Zoning File Major Subdivision Plan 1405006, hereby finds, 1, the plan conforms to the comprehensive and Graysonville community plans in usage and density. 2, a donation of land to the county for MPDUs has been approved previously. And 3, the plan avoids building on sensitive environmental areas, and hereby grants final subdivision approval with the following conditions. 1, the administrative subdivision 1803-008 must be reviewed, signed, and recorded prior to the Planning Commission signature of this major subdivision. 2, the Forest Conservation Plan FCA 05-1803-008 must be reviewed, signed, and recorded prior to obtaining Planning Commission signature of this major subdivision. 3, the updated adequate public facilities school mitigation is reviewed and approved by the APF Commission prior to the final signature of the major subdivision. 4, the placement of traffic lights be designed to illuminate intersection and crosswalks, and the number and placement of lights be subject to approval of planning and zoning staff. 5, that the height of buildings shall not exceed 30 feet. 6, that the conditions of this subdivision be applied as the plat for each phase is approved, and that documents for all provisions other than housing be filed and satisfied with Phase 1, the plat for Phase 1. I've lost track of my numbers now, 5, 6, 7. Road designs for each phase be subject to approval of planning and zoning to ensure that traffic flow for each phase be safe and self-contained, including as appropriate cul-de-sacs for turnarounds at street ends. 8, any remaining edits and/or documents required by the Department of Public Works and Department of Planning and Zoning be reviewed and approved. 9, all required bonds as sureties, review, and inspection fees must be submitted to the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Zoning as appropriate. 10, any required legal documents must be approved, signed, and recorded. 11, the MPDU dedication per the legal agreement document is approved by the county commissioners. All required bond sureties, review, and inspection fees must be submitted to the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Zoning as appropriate. And whatever the last number is, all required signatures must be obtained.
If there's a motion, is there a second? There's a motion and there's a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you all very much.
Welcome. I'd like to take a 10-minute break, please. So at 10:20, if we could return to session, to the meeting. Thank you.
What else do we have to do?